salutations, my dearest friends. My name is Samantha, and today I'm going to be wrapping up all of the books that I read in July. Hi, hello, how are you? Welcome and welcome back to my channel, and welcome back to another monthly wrap-up. I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read last month. I had a lot of really amazing reads last month. Lots of 5 stars, lots of 4 stars. I have mentioned in previous months that my stats aren't very high. Like in previous years, I have read 20, 30 books a month. But this year, I've definitely slowed down a little bit in my reading, but I've had so many 5-star reads. It kind of balances itself out because I'm having so many amazing reads that I'm not really concerned about my numbers being like super high. But anyways, I don't know why I decided to go off on that tangent. I'm a little loopy in this video because I'm so freaking hot. Our AC in our house went out. Apparently like the wires, I don't even know. Okay, the AC unit like overheated and it caused the wires to quite literally burn, like they were burnt off. But when the technician looked at it, he was like, oh, that's surprising that it didn't catch fire. What? That would be horrible. So yeah, I'm a little overheated at the moment and my brain feels fuzzy. You know when like you're prepping for a natural disaster and they're like, grab your important documents. They're like, get out. Okay, if you can grab your important documents, great. If not, get out, whatever. What are you guys grabbing? Because let me show you what I'm grabbing. I'm grabbing Indigo by Beverly Jenkins. This hardcover goes for a pretty penny on eBay. I would never resell it. Never. I would never dare. And it's also, can I get to it? Can I get to it? It's also signed by Miss Beverly Jenkins. I recently saw her at StimulitCon and it was beautiful. It was wonderful. Beautiful, it was wonderful, it was magical. I quite literally cried in her shoulders. So yeah, I'm grabbing Indigo. Okay, fuck social security and birth certificate. I'm grabbing Indigo. All right, anyways, that got off on a tangent. Let's talk about the books that I read this month. In the month of July, I read 14 books, but this month was kind of interesting because out of those 14 books, 8 of them were the same author. I have been in such an omegaverse mood recently. Like that is quite literally all I want to read all the time. I think it was last month that I picked up an omegaverse by Julian West and I loved it so freaking much. It was amazing. It was a part of the High Roller Omegaverse series. I talked about that series in my last wrap up, which I'll leave down below if you want to check it out. It's a collection of 4 books written by different authors and they're all mafia romance series, kind of loosely connected to one another. When I read Julian West's book, I loved it so much that I decided to dive into her backlist and literally binge almost everything that she's ever written. I think I only have like a couple more books left in her backlist. Normally I like to organize these wrap up videos by star ratings. I'll start at like my 5 stars and then slowly go down. But because so many of them are from the same author, I will lump all of her books together. As far as like stats go, I'll kind of go over that real quick. Out of the 14 books, I had 4 5 stars, 8 4 stars, and then I had 2 3 stars. So average rating wise, this was probably one of my best months ever. Pretty much everything I read, I really enjoyed and loved and would recommend. I didn't have any DNFs, 2 stars or 1 stars, which was awesome. These are the 4 5 stars that I read this month. I think I will start with the historical romance. This is Where Dreams Begin by Lisa Kleypas. Lisa Kleypas is one of my favorite historical romance authors of all time. I genuinely enjoy most of her backlist and this one was no exception. It was a historical Hellions book pick and the last couple months have definitely been misses. I think our last month I ended up DNFing because I didn't love it. So I was very excited to finally have a 5-star pick. This book follows our heroine, Lady Holly Taylor. She is a widow in this book. Her husband has recently passed away. Her husband's family has taken her in and been very gracious, but she's really kind of looking to start her own life with her daughter. She ends up meeting our hero at a ball. He accidentally mistakes her for someone else, kind of like sneaks out of the party to get like a breath of fresh air, and he thinks that she is his mistress and they end up sharing like a very steamy kiss with one another. There's really like intense chemistry, but they end up parting ways. Our hero cannot stop thinking about her though. So he ends up employing her to kind of help him get acclimated into society. Hero is a self-made man. He is a non-titled hero, so there is a little bit of a class difference, and he needs someone to like teach him all of the ways of nobility. She ends up moving into his house to help him and his family enter into society, and it follows the romance. The idea of like finding love after loss was also written in a very stunning way. Lisa Kleypas just has an amazing writing style. Look at this. Step back. I mean, come on. Obviously that was going to get 5 stars, so I'm very excited about that. The next one that I gave 5 stars was a cozy mystery, and it is The Body in the Bookstore by Ellie Alexander. This is the first book in her Secret Bookcase mystery series. You guys know I'm a big fan of Ellie Alexander. I love all of her cozy mysteries, and I was super excited to start this series, and I'm happy that I loved it as much as I love some of her other ones. The book follows our heroine Annie, who lives in a small town in Southern California. She works at a bookshop, but her and the employees at the bookshop are really struggling to make ends meet. They're not getting a lot of customers. She decides to host a mystery festival in her town, not only to gain more readers, but also to gain more traction for the other small businesses in town. It ends up attracting a lot of different people, especially people that our heroine went to college with. She ends up having a blast from the past when all of her college classmates end up like trying to reconnect with her, and she finds one of her classmates dead in the bookstore. A body in the bookstore. That's quite literally the title. So she needs to figure out what is happening. I'm going to consider our heroine an amateur sleuth because she actually went to college for criminology. I think that was her major. So she knows the detective on the case and ends up working with them very closely. So a lot of the decisions that she was making were just really smart, and I really loved reading her point of view. So this one is a really fun and interesting and different cozy mystery that I would highly recommend. It is pretty different from her other books, like her Bake Shop mystery series. I just think that Ellie Alexander is so good at plotting out her books, and I love them every time. So definitely want to continue in the series, but I gave this one 5 stars. I'm talking really fast. Let me get a drink of water. Next book that I gave 5 stars was Rebecca Genshak. Genshak. I texted Tori and asked her how to say the name. Let me look it up. Shack. Love Shack. Okay. The next book I gave 5 stars was Playbook by Rebecca Genshak. This is technically the second book in her Holland Brothers series, but can absolutely be read as a standalone. I did love that first book in the series. It's called Burnout. It's a romance between a Olympic gymnast and a motocross player. Loved it, gave it 5 stars. Definitely was one of my favorite reads of this entire year. So I was super excited to read Playbook, and I think I even liked it even more. This was so freaking good. Heroine accidentally ends up getting our hero's fan mail. He is a professional NFL player, and she has his old P.O. box, so she ends up getting loads of his fan mail. I mean, envelopes with lipstick marks on them, banthis, all types of love letters, and she is definitely annoyed by it. When she meets him, he is super apologetic and actually ends up kind of writing her letters as an apology and a way to get to know her. So it does have a little bit of a pen pal trope to it. Their relationship slowly develops into a fake dating romance because our heroine is trying to impress her family. I loved every bit of this book. I think it was so well done. It's a grumpy sunshine pairing where our heroine is the grumpy one, which is kind of my favorite pairing. I really, really liked our heroine. She was super sassy, very fun to read about, and I really liked Burnout. I read one of her hockey romance books that I also really liked. So I'm just interested in anything she writes at this point, and I'm happy this was another 5 star. Next one was not a surprise that it was a 5 star, and that is Donna Flames by Tessa Hale. Most books that I read by Tessa Hale, I tend to really enjoy. She writes paranormal, fantasy, why choose romances. Donna Flames is the last book in her Dragons of Ember Hollow series. Wrapped up the series in a really satisfying way. I don't want to give too many spoilers because you do technically have to read this series in order. The first book is called Twilight of Embers. It is a why choose dragon shifter paranormal romance. It follows our heroine Hayden, who her entire life she has really struggled. Her parents passed away at a young age. She's been bounced between different foster homes, and she's headed into college really trying to start a new life for herself, but also blend into the background. But when she gets there, she ends up having a connection with a couple of different guys on campus, and it turns out not only are they her fated mates, but they're also dragon shifters. Love, absolutely love. This is a very fast-paced, fun, why choose romance series. Each hero has a very distinct personality and you grow to love all of them. And I just really love Tessa Hale. I've read a lot of her backlist and I'm continuously impressed. There's something like very fun and addicting about her writing that I just like fly through it. And yeah, I would definitely recommend this entire trilogy. She writes so fast. I think the first book, Twilight of Embers, came out in the beginning of the year and we already had like the complete trilogy done before the end of the year. So love her. Next one is Vampires of El Norte. I gave this one 4 stars. I ended up reading this because of Summerween. I did a whole reading vlog on it. If you want to check that out, I'll leave it down below. You guys know I love a good vampire book. I love a good vampire book. And this is kind of like a gothic thriller romance. It has a little bit of everything. It follows our main characters Nena and Nestor, kind of childhood sweethearts. They have grown up together and developed feelings for each other even though their families don't necessarily approve of that. Also grew up hearing a lot of campfire stories or what they think is just folklore, and one day they end up going on an adventure and stumbling upon what they think is a vampire. Our heroine Nena is so severely injured that Nestor actually thinks that she is dead. So he is absolutely devastated by her death and terrified of her family. So he ends up running away. The story picks up again 10 years later. Nestor comes back to his hometown and realizes that Nena is still alive. So it follows their second chance romance. This is all happening during the Mexican-American War, where a lot of their land and their people are being threatened, not only by soldiers, but also by vampires. So much is going on in this book. The setting has this like gothic undertone and is so lyrical and beautifully written, and I really enjoyed it. I listened to the audiobook, which I thought was fantastic, and I gave it 4 stars. The only reason I didn't give it 5 stars was because I feel like I needed more vampires. The romance was great, the backstory was great, I loved how we got flashbacks, I loved the writing style. I just wanted more vampires because I'm vampire obsessed, but it was still a really good one. All right, now we can talk about all of the omegaverse books that I read, and I read a lot. Most of them were Jillian West, but I did read one omegaverse by another author. It's called Not Just Their Nanny by Eve Newton. I ended up giving this one 3 stars, and I'm sure you can tell by the title, it is a nanny romance. This book follows our heroine who is an omega, and she's going through a really bad and kind of abusive relationship. So she decides to start a new life for herself and move out of town. She ends up getting a job as a live-in nanny for a hero that has recently been rejected by his mate. Our hero is an alpha, and his mate, the mother of his child, ended up leaving them and rejecting their bond, which is a very like painful experience for him, both physically and emotionally. So he's really focused on just caring for his daughter, but he ends up having a romance with his nanny. This is a why choose romance. He also has a pretty intense connection with 2 of his best friends, so the 4 of them create a pack. Loved this one. I love nanny romances. I think they're a lot of fun, and this was just a good like solid omegaverse. Lots of heats and knots and bonding. I read a lot of omegaverse. It is a subgenre that I'm very familiar with. It's something that I really love. I'm always looking for ones that are very like unique and different because I've read so many. If you're not familiar with omegaverse, it is very similar to shifter romances. It's kind of like if shifter romances and fated mates had a baby. People are born with a certain designation, either an alpha, a beta, or an omega, and depending on your designation, you have like different biological needs and urges. You can kind of do anything in omegaverse. It could be set in a contemporary setting, paranormal setting. You can have it wide choose, poly, male. You could quite literally do anything with omegaverse. This one was solid. Like if you're not familiar with omegaverse, it actually explains the dynamics really well. So I would think of this as like a beginner omegaverse book, but I still really liked it. Gave it 3 stars. Definitely interested in reading more from the author. The next 8 books are all by the same author, Miss Jillian West. She writes a bunch of why choose omegaverse books that I just fell in love with. I read some of her Mafia omegaverse. I read some of her Rockstar omegaverse. Although a lot of them can technically be read as standalones, they do exist in different series. So I would try to lump them together in a way That makes sense. The first series I started reading was her Ruined Records series. It starts off with a duology. The first book is called Left in Ruins, and the second book is called Madness, and both books follow the same set of characters. Obviously, this is an omegaverse, but it's also a poly rock star romance as well. Our heroine, Lyric, is kind of like a rock star legend. Her parents were a part of a very famous rock star band, kind of known to the public by performing with her parents when she was younger and also writing some of their songs. So a lot of people expect her to be like this musical prodigy, but she has stage fright and it really scares her to be in like the public eye. Heroine Lyric is going through a lot. Not only she's dealing with the scrutiny from the paparazzi and the public, but she's also dealing with a potential stalker. She ends up creating a pack with quite a few different heroes. She ends up writing songs for another rock star band and has a bond with some of them. She has a bond with one of her bodyguards. The story is broken up into 2 different books. It is a duology. You have to read it in order, and it's just really fun. I really liked this one. Our heroine was so sweet. Heroine is also neurodivergent, so it has some pretty good representation. I would consider this kind of poly because some of the heroes eventually develop a romance as well. I gave Left in Ruins 3 stars, and I gave the second book, Madness, 4 stars. I did like the second book because I felt like we got to know the heroes a little bit more. I will definitely say that Jillian West is for people who love omegaverse. You love it. You read AO3 fan fiction. You are so well versed into the subgenre and the niche that is omegaverse, and you just get it, okay? You like the heats and the knots and the bonding and the fated mates aspect. Jillian West is for you. If you've never read omegaverse, I fear her writing might not hit for you because it is so... I wanted to make that disclaimer because I don't want people who have never read the genre to pick up these books and be like, what the fuck, Sam? Don't come at me if you don't understand it, okay? The girls that get it, and the girls that don't. I wouldn't consider this a beginner omegaverse. I would consider this a book for someone who already loves the subgenre. Okay, don't want to talk about those 2 books too much. Anyways, in that same series, Ruined Record series, I read No Omega Needed. This one is another rock star romance series. What's really interesting is that our main heroine, Love, is a beta. Usually in an omegaverse, it's the omega that creates the pack and the bonds and is kind of like the center of the pack. In this book, our heroine and the center of the pack is a beta. She's in a relationship with 2 rock stars. They kind of had an open relationship with one another, and they were just living the crazy rock star life until she got pregnant. Now that she is pregnant, she is pretty nervous that her alphas are going to leave her for an omega, but they are completely and totally obsessed with her, and they are willing to do anything they can to prove it. So it follows our heroine as she is creating her little pack, ends up bonding with the rock stars as well as her bodyguards. Jillian West loves a bodyguard romance. Nearly every single book that she has a bodyguard trope in it. This was a really fun book because it had pretty different dynamics. Not only is our heroine a beta, but she's also pregnant throughout the entire story, and I just loved how our heroes were like so obsessed with her. I just loved it. The last book in the Ruined Record series is called Wicked Truth. Again, it is another rock star wide shoes romance. It follows our heroine Oakley, who is an up-and-coming star. Her dream is to really make it big in the music industry. However, it proves to be a little bit difficult because of her designation as an omega. Omegas tend to be viewed as very submissive. They have to take time off due to their heats, so not a lot of people tend to take them seriously. So she is hiding the fact that she is an omega as she is trying to make it big in the music industry. She ends up having a romance with a couple of different people in her band. This one is super sexy. Super, super sexy. I absolutely loved it. I gave it 4 stars. I know a lot of the tropes seemed very similar because they're all in the same series and they're all rockstar omegaverses, but once you read them, the characters really have their own personality, and I just loved all of the different nuances between them. Can you read them out of order? Yes. Would I recommend it? No, because you do see different side characters throughout the entire series. Has like a huge found family trope. So I really like this one if you're looking for an omegaverse series and you like rockstar romances. Jillian West does have another rockstar omegaverse series. It is called Ruined Records Chicago. So it is kind of like loosely tied into the last series that I mentioned. First one is called Not Guaranteed, and I gave it 4 stars. This book follows our heroine Tinley, who is an Omega, and she has been like hopelessly in love with her best friend's brother for as long as she can remember. Best friend's brother, our hero, is a musician, so he ends up touring with a new band, and she ends up getting a job as that band's photographer. So they spend a lot of time together on a tour bus. It not only follows the romance between her best friend's brother, but also his bandmates. So this is another why choose romance. All of these are why choose romances. It's just Gillian West's niche. Gillian West has a very specific writing style. Her books are very sweet and fluffy, but also incredibly steamy. But they also have amazing mental health representation. A lot of her characters are also on the spectrum, so it has that representation as well. She also talks about things like alcohol and drug abuse, because this is a rock star romance and that is like something that's readily available to them. So I just think she does a lot really, really well, and she's able to like cover heavy topics and still have a actual plot, but still manage to keep things very lighthearted and sweet, if that makes sense. So I don't know. I've been loving her books, and I ended up binging her entire backlist. And then the second book in that duology is called Not Wanted. This one follows our heroine Shayna, who is an Omega. She is the sister of the hero in the first book. Her one is a fashion designer, and she recently went through a really bad breakup where the men were kind of like using her for her designs and her talent and her connections. So she's really embarrassed. She doesn't really know what she's doing with her life. Her brother actually ends up asking her for a favor for some of his bandmates to stay with her. Those are also going through a difficult time. One of our heroes is really struggling with alcohol and drug abuse. So they end up living together in this like forced proximity situation and really just like bonding and healing together. It's really sweet. I liked this one a lot. Our heroine is such a spitfire. She's so sassy and so funny. I really liked this one. I gave it 4 stars. Next 3 books I'm going to wrap up relatively quickly because they're all a part of a series and have very similar tropes. The series is called the Assurance Security series. It is a collection of books that follows heroes who own a private security company, and their goal is to really protect Omegas because Omegas can be quite vulnerable, especially to like human trafficking. So our heroes have created this security program that's kind of like a Robin Hood situation. They kill the bad guys, essentially. So I read pretty much every book in this series. Each book is why choose Omegaverse and follows like different heroes with their mates. So the first one is called Not Ready. I gave it 4 stars. The second one is called Ready or Not, and I gave that one 4 stars. And the last one that I read was All In, and I also gave that one 4 stars. I gave all of them 4 stars. This entire series was really fun. If you like bodyguard romances, that is a trope again that Gillian West just does so well and she loves so much. Pretty much every book in the series has that trope. The series also has a lot of surprise pregnancy and secret baby in it, so if that's a trope you like, then you'll probably like this series as well. Again, this is for people who love Omegaverse, okay? It is very niche, it is very specific, and it is very well done. But if you've never read an Omegaverse, you might be very confused. Hopefully I wrapped that up in a way that made sense. It was kind of difficult because I was reading books in the same series by the same author with a lot of the same tropes, and once you read them, they all feel very much their own. Gillian West does have like a whole reading order on her Instagram page, like a whole graphic of where you should start and what you should read in order. So if you want to check out her books, follow her on Instagram and you can kind of just make your way through her backlist, because all of her Omegaverses that I've read, and I've read a lot, have been really good. All right, I'm a little out of breath. I only read 14 books, but somehow I managed to talk for an entire hour. So we're going to wrap things up. This was a long video. If you stayed this long and you enjoyed the video, leave me an emoji. What emoji should we use? Let's leave the not emoji. Oh god. Because we read so many Omegaverses in this video, I know there's a not emoji. It's like ropes in a knot. Leave the not emoji down below, because if you know Omegaverse, you know. Anyways, leave that in the comments down below if you stayed this long, so I know that we're bookish besties. I am looking for a lot more Omegaverse to read because I just can't get enough. So if you have any Omegaverse recommendations, also leave them in the comments down below. As always, thank you for taking time out of your day to spend time with me. It means the world to me. I hope you guys are all staying happy and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!